Hello, this is Ren, and you are listening to The Virtue of Patience Through New Eyes. I hope everyone's had a wonderful week so far. I'm excited to be airing my second episode in this podcast series. You know, a lot of my friends are kind of like, whoa, you did a podcast. And I don't know. I have an Aries moon if you're into astrology. So I'm kind of just like I'm just going to do it right now type of person. And that's always how I've been. If I don't start something that way, then it's just never going to happen. So I've done a lot of things where I just kind of jumped into it and just saw what happened from it. So I'm just hoping that this can kind of be one of those experiences that hopefully helps some people along the way and maybe helps me by verbalizing some of these things that I've been thinking about for my whole life, if not my adult life. So, with that being said, today's topic is going to start to dive into the virtue of patience with respect to relationships. And I wanted to start with relationships because that's where we start to learn social skills as human beings. You know, when you're a baby turning into a toddler, the first interactions you have in life are with your family. And that is pivotal to determining, who you're going to be and what you're going to do in life, I believe. And when I originally started writing my book on the topic, I think I started with my mother or my father, and I just kind of went into like a deep dive of my relationships with them, how we were, and how we got to where we are now. However, due to unforeseen circumstances, I am changing up the conversation topic a little bit, and I'm posing the theme as my abuser is dead, so now what? And this is all because this week I got the news that my ex-stepfather passed away. He was found dead in his apartment by my mother sometime early this week. It is believed he might have had a stroke from taking Ozempic. So if you're taking Ozempic, please make sure that you're not consuming alcohol while taking it. There have been a large number of deaths due to combining the two. So I got a phone call early in the morning. I was in an early meeting. And I told my mom, hey, can I call you back? I'm in a meeting. She was like, yeah, that's fine. And I asked if everything was okay, just because I wanted to make sure it wasn't an emergency. My mom, she's pretty methodical about calling me on a certain day. And when she calls me out of the blue, it raises some hairs and causes some frissons, as we call it in the South, which just means goosebumps. So she texts me and she says, there's something I need to tell you and Maddie. So again, I'm very concerned about what thing she's going to tell me and my sister. So I call her and she tells me that my ex-stepfather is dead. So in my first episode, if you happen to listen to it, I talked about being sexually abused as a child. Well, lo and behold, he was the abuser during that time. It was a duration of 10 years of my life. And, it was some of the hardest 10 years of my life that I really wouldn't wish upon anybody. So when she told me that he had passed away, I just told her I was relieved. And I think she was also very relieved. She had a very complicated relationship with him just because of my brother and him being my brother's father and not wanting to not let him have communication with him, which to this day I still don't understand. But he's not my child. And so I thought it was weird to feel relieved that someone passed away, because that's typically not the word one uses when someone dies. But the hold that this man has had on me for a very long time felt like it let go when I heard the news that he had passed away. I just felt like I could finally breathe a breath of fresh air, knowing that he was not also breathing the same air as me. And I know that might sound dark and twisted or whatever, but it's the truth. Knowing that he's not walking on the same earth as me right now is calming. He really did a number on myself, and I'm not going to speak on behalf of my family members, but I believe them as well. There's truly not a nice thing I can say about this person, this man, if you even want to call him that. Sure, he had a dark and twisted past, but he didn't have to bring it into the present, if you want my opinion. He was an alcoholic, verbally abusive, mentally abusive, sexually abusive. Any word of abuse you can think of, that was him. You know, from the age of 9 or 10, I learned how to make drinks and bring him his drinks. I kind of debated whether I wanted to go into some of the details of what was going on in the house when I was living there. And I might tell a few stories just of what has caused me to have some triggers about certain things, just because I think it might be helpful for someone listening and knowing that, you know, you're heard and you're seen. But before I go into that, just one thing that I am thankful for, if you even want to call it that, is he taught me what a toxic person looks like. He taught me what an abusive person looks like. And now that I'm old enough, I'm an adult, I can decide if I let those types of people have power over me and control over me. I'm so sorry. I 100% turned off my notifications. Please excuse me. So, you know, I say that he taught me what an abusive, toxic person looks like because I've had a hard time in the job industry dealing with supervisors or just the structure of a place, because it breeds for toxicity. It breeds for microaggressions. It breeds for people putting unnecessary pressure on you to do things the way they want it to be done without any care for your mental health or just health in general. It's made me see that, you know, when people are giving you gifts that aren't in your immediate close circle, you should be suspicious, because typically gifts are tied with a favor for later. And that's why I'm always so weird about gifts. But I say that too just to thank him. Because without him, I would not be able to recognize toxic people as quickly as I do. And I don't put up with it. I'm not going to work somewhere. I'm not going to be around somebody who's toxic or manipulative. If I even get a whiff of it, I'm gone. And I'm not necessarily going to tell you why I'm leaving because I'm not your mama. I'm not some arbitrator of truth. You have to figure it out for yourself. You have to be reflective enough to see that people are avoiding you, people are not wanting to be around you because you're toxic. And what I've learned too is when you try to confront people who are being toxic, they're typically very defensive and won't hear it, will not hear it at all. So even when you're trying to set some healthy boundaries, they don't care. But that's neither here nor there for right now. So, what do I first remember about this horrible human being? So, I think I remember when my grandparents had first, I guess, invited him over for a family barbecue in the backyard or something. I think my mom was looking for a new relationship finally after the divorce with my dad. It had been a few years. I don't really know if my mom was dating on and off. She always kept that kind of private and to herself. So she could have been, she could have not been. But I think my grandparents saw that she wanted to invite someone back into her life in a relationship type of setting. Why they thought Michael, oh, that's his name, Michael. Why they thought Michael was a good fit, I don't know. Maybe he manipulated them as well. I have no clue. Well, he came. I think we met him. Vaguely remember. I remembered him just kind of being a little too showy for me. And I was always like very skeptical of new people just after the divorce with my mom and my dad. I think that was pretty dramatic. I hardly remember my childhood and I hardly remember what happened then, but I was always just angry, very angry at the world, at my parents, at everyone, feeling left alone, feeling abandoned. So I was not ready to accept this new person into our life. I didn't trust him. I didn't know him. And he kind of had a weird vibe to me, even at the age of like, I had to have been like 7 or 8, maybe a little older. But I didn't like him. I never liked him from the get-go. Well, my mom decides to go back to chiropractor school, so we moved to Texas for a little bit, and he keeps coming around, and then his son started coming around, and I guess they were dating. And then he eventually moved in with us. I ended up having to move into this smaller room that wasn't even really a room. It was supposed to be a home office. So his son could have the bigger room with just his bed and a TV in the room. And I had so much stuff. I had my dollhouse. I had my vanity. I had all of these things crammed into this tiny room for his son's comfort for whatever reason. Well, they continued to date. They had moved in. And I remember the first day that the sexual abuse started. I don't remember how old I was. I must have been in first or second grade. So I was young. And he had gotten out of the shower, and I think he had a towel on, and then I came into the room, and he had like dropped his towel down, and he had his penis out. Again, I mean, this might be too much, but he coaxed me into touching his penis, and I don't even fully recall what happened after that. I don't think anything happened to me after that. It was just a matter of me doing that. And you know, I'm heterosexual, so obviously I was attracted to a penis even at that young of an age, but it is the job of the adult to know that that's not appropriate for a young child to be doing, especially someone who's in a pseudo father figure type of place. And so I didn't tell my mom about that. I was always reluctant to tell my mother things, even my father. I was always a private person in the sense of when things are happening to me that are affecting me, I don't really share that with people. And I've grown out of that a bit. I think it allows me to connect more with people when I actually do share things, good or bad, that happen. So I never shared that with anyone. And things started just to progress more where he would mess with my genital areas and I would, help him masturbate basically in closed rooms when my mom wasn't home. And, I felt that things were off by doing these things. I didn't fully understand what was weird about the situation, but it definitely felt bad. And it just was like, we're sneaking around my mom, and I don't know, it just felt like I was being taken advantage of. And oftentimes he would, get me gifts or take me places or buy me nice clothes or something after, or in order to coax me into doing those things. And I never liked doing it, obviously, but it was a disastrous situation because I couldn't tell my mom anything because I just didn't feel like I could trust her. One, for letting this man into our lives, and then, I don't know, there was just an emotional disconnect there. And then my dad, we maybe talked a few times during the week on the phone, and he never asked the right questions, I think. He was living his life, not really being a parent. And we hardly saw my grandparents. They would come and, everyone was terrified of Michael. He would blow up at almost any second. And that was partly because of the alcohol and who knows what drugs he was probably taking. But, it was such a chaotic childhood. We were always all over the place, whether it was visiting my dad, going back to Ragley, where he's from, because, they were building a house or moving a house or something, I never was just in one spot at one time, having to worry about going to school and making friends. No, that was like the least of my worries. But my mom eventually got engaged with Michael, and she had asked us if she should marry him. Well, I told her no, and I'm glad I did, but did she listen to me? No. She ended up marrying him, and we all lived together in this place called Ragley, Louisiana, for a long time. We had moved around a lot, too, when I was a baby. I mean, I was born in Monroe, which is North Louisiana. Then my sister was born in Lafayette. Then we lived in Jackson, Mississippi. We lived in Vicksburg. We lived in Clinton. We lived in Brobridge. We moved to Texas. Then we moved to Ragley. And we were in Ragley for the 10-year duration. So it was fourth grade to my sophomore year of high school that we were there. And during that time, it was just a roller coaster. It was whirlwind. It was horrible. It was screaming. My mom and Michael screaming all the time. Me screaming with Michael. Us making him drinks. Us having to be naked. Or us waking up with his head being under the blanket near our genital areas. Him making me and my sister both do things with him. And I remember one night, my mom came out of their bedroom and I was going to the bathroom, and she just looked at me and she said, "Is he doing things to you?" And I was so scared. And I probably just should have told her the truth. But I didn't, because I was scared of him and the threats he had made about killing me or my sister. Yeah, it was pretty scary. And, he had pulled knives out before, and he shot our family dog for, peeing on clothes once because the dog was scared. So I didn't know what this man was capable of doing, and I was just scared, and I wanted to protect people, so I lied. And I probably shouldn't have. Yeah, that probably would have ended a lot of things, or who knows what would have happened, to be honest. But I eventually tried to stop doing it, but when I stopped, he would just be so horrible. He'd be so mean, and he would yell all the time, and it was really, I was forced to do things that I really didn't want to do. And I've kind of just made that promise to myself that I wouldn't do that anymore. Sorry, I'm kind of getting teary-eyed. But aside from the sexual abuse, he was just a horrible person, in the sense of not what a father figure should be like, in any sense of the word. I remember one night, and this one is just fresh on my mind because, I don't know, I have a car. This is just involving a car. I was a cheerleader in high school, and I loved cheerleading, and I loved the fact that I could get away from home and not have to worry about what was going on at home. Go to practice, I could get home and stretch and just practice my cheers and chants and not have to worry about my life. Well, there was one night he was being really nice, which always was suspicious to me. And he was like, "Oh, I'll take the truck, go fill it up with gas, and then you'll have a full tank to go to the basketball game that you're cheering at tonight." And I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." Well, he goes to fill up the truck, and then the time for the game to start had passed. So I called him and I said, "Hey, where are you? I need to get to the game." He kind of sounded drunk, and he's like, "Oh, I'm around." And I was just like, "Oh, okay, well, the game is kind of starting, so I need to get there." And he just started screaming at me. And I didn't know what I did wrong. I didn't know why he was yelling at me like this. And he came home, and he was just yelling at me, and I just took the car keys, and I just was bawling my eyes out, and I drove to the game, crying, basically the entire drive there. Yeah, and I got to the game, and no one asked me what was wrong. I'm a big stickler for if someone looks like they're upset, you need to ask. Nobody asked. Yeah. And it's okay. It's okay that nobody asked. I have another memory where I had to drive us home because at the restaurant my mom and Michael got so drunk that neither of them could drive. I don't even know if I had my license yet. And he shoved my little baby brother's head out of the window. It seemed like he was about to throw him out the window. I remember one time we were watching a movie and he was getting mad because I wasn't paying attention to the movie, and we started yelling at each other, and then he told me he would kill me because I said I would call social services to come pick us up. And he said I'd be dead before they got there. I remember times where he's pulled knives out at me. And not to just keep going down like the turmoil of my existence, but the night that we finally left that house, it was, I think it was beginning of June in 2011. That night, he was mad because none of us wanted to go in the living room and watch a movie together. He was always obsessed with the family going in the living room to watch a movie together. I don't know what it was, but that's what he wanted. Well, none of us wanted to. And Sammy, he was really little at the time. I think he was 4 or 5. Or, no. I don't even know. He was born in 2005, so he was 6. He was 6. And he just came in our room, and me and my sister, our room was always messy. My house is still always messy. I'm just like, I'll get to it later. But we had our movies, so we had, VCR, cassette tape, not cassette tapes, we had VCRs and DVDs just kind of stacked in front of our TV. Well, Sammy came in and, he was just playing and he knocked him over. Well, the loud noise, I guess, made Michael mad, along with us not wanting to watch a movie with him. So he comes in mine and my sister's room, because we were sharing a room in this house. And he just started screaming at us. And he was like, you guys need to clean your room, and you need to not have your movies stacked up there, and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, this isn't a big deal. We always have our movies stacked up. He just knocked him over. He was just playing. And then I don't know why the argument escalated the way it did, but it just did. And I told him I hated him. I told him I just wanted us to leave that house. And he said he's been trying to get us to leave this house for years, which he made very clear when my mom got pregnant with my little brother, that he did not want us there. So I don't know. That's something to dwell on. Maybe he was acting this horribly just to get us to leave in the long run. But, we were screaming at each other. My mom was just sitting on my bed or my sister's bed. I can't remember. And he lunged towards me with his arms extended out in a chokehold-like manner. And to me, it seemed like he was coming for my throat to strangle me. But luckily, my mom jumped in and tackled him to the bed. I remember just scratching his shirt and clawing a hole in his shirt. And then, I don't remember. Oh, that was the same night that he kicked the door open and broke our door because he was so mad at the loud sound. So then he left that evening. I don't know where he went. I remember my mom saying that he knows that we'll probably not be there in the morning. And he was right. He was absolutely right. My mom called my grandma, and she said, "Can you please come pick up the girls tomorrow morning?" I shoved everything that I could in my cheerleading bag, clothes, books that I wanted to keep. And I did not sleep at all that night because I was just so scared that he was going to come back and finish the job. But thankfully he didn't, and we were able to meet my grandma the next day. She picked us up and brought us to Breaux Bridge. Me and my sister shared the bed in the back for a few months. My mom slept on the couch, and my little brother slept on the cot in the living room. My mom was still, for some reason, entertaining vacations and trips with him with other people. I didn't know why. And then we eventually moved into a trailer. And that was the end of the era of living with Michael. But unfortunately, my mom still let him have Sammy, my little brother, in his life. So there was always the off chance that I would have to see him or hear his voice. There was one day he came to pick up my brother, and he was supposed to wait in his car. So my brother would go outside to meet him. He decided to bang on the front door instead of listening to my mom's explicit instructions. And I just remember sitting in front of the door crying and telling him to go away. He was just not a good person, and I know I just shared a lot. And I hope it wasn't too much, to be honest. I mean, I don't know how detailed people get on these things, but it shaped me in a lot of ways. It formed who I am as a person. Not necessarily in a good way or a bad way. I mean, there are some good things, but there are tons of bad too. And honestly, him dying, it made me feel free. And I haven't felt free in a very long time. I'm sorry, I'm getting all choked up. I talked with one of my friends, and she just said, like, he took so much away from me when I was a kid. And, you know, honestly, most of the adults in my life took a lot away from me when I was a kid. I didn't get to be a kid. I had to grow up really quickly, start thinking about things at a very high level at a young age. But, you know, I try to get my kid-like wonder and things as I'm older. But now the question is, he's dead, so now what? A lot of people, not a lot, but, you know, some people were really trying to pressure me before he died to bring up criminal charges against him. And I think Louisiana had just recently changed their laws saying that you could bring these types of charges against a sexual abuser after you've turned 18 forever or, you know, indefinitely. And they just really wanted me to do it. I don't know why. I don't know why they were pushing me so hard. And I think the rationale is you can't just let people like this get away with that. Coming from an attorney's perspective, the legal system is not just desserts. It's not always going to provide you with the justice you deserve. And additionally, there's really not a lot of evidence to prove the claims that I said, other than my testimony, my sister's testimony, my mom's testimony, and maybe even other people. And granted, we probably would have gotten a lot of people to testify and say the things that were happening, but why would I want to open old wounds to the extent that it would be public like that? Why would I add fuel to a fire that died a long, long time ago? And I've been processing for years. It just didn't make any sense to me. And it didn't make any sense to me to be tied to someone in a criminal matter. To me, I needed to learn how to heal on my own and not worry if society is going to condemn this man, who really, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't really matter to society as a whole. He's a nobody. Nobody knows him. Nobody cares. No, for me, it was just always about finding peace and freedom and escaping my mind and getting out of my head, which for me is a very hard task because I'm constantly in my head. I don't let a lot of people inside of my head. Yeah, I kind of protect it a little too much sometimes, but I don't think that when you or anyone else ever is in a similar situation should feel pressured to press criminal charges. It is perfectly okay to not press charges and to just go about your day and live your life to the fullest extent that you can. Forgive those who you can. Confront those who perpetuated the abuse, who allowed the abuse. And don't be ashamed of who you are, I think is the biggest thing that I can hope to share with people. You can embrace the fact that you were a victim, you were manipulated, and that you learned from it, and you're stronger, and you don't have to take it anymore. You don't have to allow other people to be abusive and manipulative, because at the end of the day, they don't care about you. They're not going to sacrifice themselves for you. You have to hold that power within yourself, to be honest. So don't feel bad about any path you take. Just try to be reflective enough to see who you are and what you want to be. At least that's just how I've been able to persist forward from all of this. So, in the grand scheme of things, how does this relate to patience? I think this all relates to patience. I think knowing what I know now from that relationship with Michael as my stepfather has taught me to take a step back and really listen to people. It's when you listen to people that you understand their true intentions and true nature. You can determine if someone is who they say they are, if they have any ill wishes or ill intentions towards you. You don't have to be so, I use this word a lot, bulldozery. You don't have to plow through things. You don't have to fill the room up with your space. Sometimes it's okay to step back and observe. When you do that, you can objectively determine if someone is toxic if someone is potentially an abuser. Just look at the way that they hold themselves. See if they're trying to be larger than life in their conversations. Do they make you feel comfortable? Do they make you feel uncomfortable? What type of responses do they have to your questions? Do they seem defensive or do they seem open? These are the types of things that I really learned from my life experience. And also just, nobody can make you do something that you don't want to do. And, eventually I came to an age when I was like 15 where I was willing to die on that bridge. A lot of kids my age wouldn't have fought with Michael the way that I did. We yelled, we screamed. I was not putting up with it for my sake or my sister's sake. I just don't think anyone should behave that way. And I will tell you when I think you're behaving badly. Because the truth needs to be out there. Or at least my perspective of the way you're behaving should be on your mind. And I'm not going to regret that. If you can't handle someone expressing themselves, you need to reevaluate yourself because no one is perfect. I take feedback from people because there are times when I'm not behaving appropriately and I don't get defensive about it because how can I be defensive about something that someone is reacting to that I did? I can apologize for my actions, or I can try to tell them why I behaved a certain way and why I won't apologize, but you don't have to do it in such an emotionally turbulent way. So I just say all of these things so that you can be patient in trying to figure someone out. You don't have to rush into any type of relationship with somebody. I've seen so many times where my friends have rushed into relationships with really bad people, and I saw the signs. I saw the signs immediately, but they didn't listen to me. And to be fair, these are things that unfortunately you have to experience for yourself to truly understand. I've always been more of a theoretical person, so if you tell me these rules, these things to look for, I just listen to you. And I don't know, I can just go with that. But for some people, they need to experience it themselves. And unfortunately, I wish that was not the case. So patience in this regard, I think, is so important. And you should never put all of your trust into someone right away, whether that's honestly a family member, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a job, whatever it is. Be patient with yourself and with others so that you don't fall into a trap of becoming a victim like me, like others. And if you have been a victim, just remember that you can still live. You can still have a life. It may seem like it's a half-life for a good bit of time. I can't lie. I felt like I was having a half-life most of my life because I wasn't being honest with people. I wasn't sharing my home life experience with anyone. I did not tell a soul. The only person who really knew besides Michael was my sister. I do wonder what would have happened if I actually would have shared what was going on with me with a teacher or a friend's parent. But I had such a skewed perspective of parents, of authority figures, that I just didn't feel like I could trust them. And honestly, to this day, I still don't feel like I can trust a majority of authority figures because at the end of the day, their interests are not my interests. They don't care about me as an individual. And honestly, I'm glad that I know that. I'm glad that I can carry that information and potentially use it to change the perspective, to change the dialogue so that we don't continue this cycle, this burden for generations to come. Okay. I think that's all I have for tonight. If you have questions or comments, please feel free to leave them on the podcast site. I would love to hear from you. I think next week I'll go back into my regular pattern of things and maybe even tell you a little bit about what's been going on in my life if anyone's interested. I do have to say this week, I saw one of my really close friends, Jeff. He has a podcast too, the Dave and Jeff Show. And we were talking about like podcasting, so it was really fun. But we saw Lori Kay. She was a reporter. And she actually did the last interview with John Lennon the day he was shot. So we got to listen to snippets of that interview, and she talked about kind of the interview and talking with him and Yoko, and it was really cool. So I look forward to more events like that and to reading her book. I think it's called Confessions of a Rock and Roll Name Dropper. So not that I'm getting paid for that, but just if you're interested, I love rock and roll and I love history, so I think it'll be a good read. But until next time, thanks for listening to The Virtue of Patience Through New Eyes with Rin.